the work that you were talking about, this joint commission, this is an extraordinary one because this Toulmin Foundation helped to organize a variety of symphony orchestras. But as you already alluded to, Maestro, in the past, we've been part of consortia that make a commission, and we might get to have a second or third performance. But this is very new. This will be the first time that these notes will orchestrally come to life. That's a different onus, I think, on you and the ensemble.
Right. No, it's very exciting to be, yeah, to be the very first audience, the very first orchestra, the very first time this piece comes to life. We had actually, a part of what I think was super wise about this commission was, part of the commission was paying for kind of a workshop session before. So in November, Angel Lamb came to the Quad Cities and we added an extra rehearsal just to go over, not the complete piece because it wasn't finished yet, but to go over many of the movements of the piece that we're going to hear this Masterworks, and for the composer to kind of workshop it and to hear it live and to hear, oh, well, let's try this, or maybe I need to balance this better, or, oh, this tempo wasn't quite right. And for me and for the orchestra as well, to get to know the piece beforehand while it's still being made is an incredible luxury, and so that was a great part of it too. And so we've had the experience, we kind of know, we know what most of the piece, we played it, or kind of the forerunner of the piece in its present condition. But the idea to workshop it and to have that kind of interaction between the composer and the orchestra is also very, very rich.
Well, a little bit about the background here. You mentioned the title Unearthing the Heart, the Thousand Grottoes of Dunhuang. And for those not in the know, this refers to a UNESCO World Heritage Site in what we would consider to be northwestern China. And it was, I think for some folks, it might be easier to picture the ancient city of Petra in Jordan, where you had buildings carved into stone and entryways and caverns and caves and that kind of a thing. But here you had also a race against time, because the Gobi Desert was starting to come over and take over these grottos, as they're often called. There are about 492 examples of these cave temples that were created between the 5th and 13th centuries. Some of the earlier ones show a definite Indian Western influence. Later, you see the Tang Dynasty, which now we're talking about the maybe 7th century of the Common Era and a little bit beyond that. But again, the desert was taking them over. And then only about 120 or so years ago were these discovered. So right there, you've gotten an introduction to a Raiders of the Lost Ark theme, I think.
Right. Well, and it's also something I dare say, your average, speaking for myself, did I know about these caves? No, I did not. And that's really the beauty of what we do, what we as artists do, and the ability to collaborate and for our fellow artists to open our eyes to something we didn't even know existed. And now I'm not an expert on these caves, but I know a lot more than I used to, and it's a place that it's on my list. I got to go see those. It's going to be an amazing thing. Yeah, and so I'm really grateful to have just kind of serendipitously come into this project with a great composer and with dancers like we'll talk about, and it just kind of took off. It kind of had a life of its own, which are kind of the best way for things to happen, I think.
Well, and we won't have time to go through the whole history, but we encourage people to look up on your own Googles, Dunhuang, Dunhuang. These are these grottos, and in this particular set, some 50,000 documents were hidden away, and literally hidden, because they did not know. The entryway to these grottos, the succession of grottos, wasn't discovered until about 1870 or 80 or so, when they found a sort of a false wall in one of the more superficial caves. And then they started going back and back and back. And what I love about coupling that with Angel Lamb is, as we heard previously, she knows how to paint a picture with sound. And these are very visual caves. Each has a theme that was carried on in their successive generations. So I can't wait to see the painting that she is able to create with the sound.
Right. Well, you're exactly right. And there's also going to be a dance element that I don't know if you're aware of that. So Zhongmei is an amazing Chinese dancer, and I had collaborated with her, a choreographer and has a dance troupe. I had collaborated with her at for the Bright Sheng opera, Dream of the Red Chamber, and it's all just her husband, who is a great China expert and was a great not novelist, but a great writer, and like the Time chief bureau for Time magazine in Beijing. Anyway, just a great expert writer and critic, really expert about China, was her husband, and he passed away kind of unexpectedly. And so she was looking for a piece to memorialize him, a dance piece. Of course, she's a dancer, and so. But she asked me for the name of a composer, and this was just in Quad when I was there with Angel Lam, and so I put the two of them together. And she, Angel really wasn't clear about the idea for her piece for us. And so the idea of Zhang Mei, the choreographer, bringing the idea of these caves, the Mogao caves, and the grottos, and letting that story kind of guide the trajectory of the piece. And then having her dancers come, it became a really natural thing that, well, if this is now kind of a dance piece, like the Rite of Spring on the second half, by the way, not that, and that was totally accidental. I mean, now it looks like it's just like genius programming with, two dance pieces, two ballet, but originally Angel Lam's piece wasn't categorically, a dance piece. So it just, there you go. Anyway, so Zhang Mei is bringing her dancers. There's the Chinese Heritage Foundation from up here in Minneapolis is sponsoring them. They are all about Chinese culture and about opening up Chinese culture to the United States and sharing that. And so they're sponsoring the dancers and help. So it's just like there's so many tangential pieces coming together that make it a very, very exciting time.
Well, and you mentioned Zhang Mei. Again, another homework assignment for folks before we get to the concert hall. You might want to look up the writings of her husband, Richard Bernstein. And as he went on a quest, in a sense, to go and retrace some of these ancient paths that connected India to China, because Buddhism made its journey from India to China, centuries and centuries ago. And so this will help, I think, fill in the picture. But the dance element,
it's the Silk Road also, right? Yeah.
In the Silk Road, and the and one of the things the thoughts of Angel Lam are so poetic, and I have seen some of these things that she's written down. I'm sure we'll get to see them in the program, where she talks about these caves. We lock things away in caves, right? And she has an idea that our modern minds have kind of locked away the wisdom of our hearts, that could actually navigate us a little bit, maybe sometimes better than our minds do. And so that's where this unearthing the heart. It's not just about unearthing these secrets in Northwest China on the verge of the Gobi Desert. It's an invitation for us to unearth the wisdom that's locked in our own hearts. I can't wait to hear this.
I'm same. I'm very excited.
So exciting. And as you said, this is just the first half. So,
right.
The Rite of Spring, a seminal work in 20th century music. There's sort of a before and an after. Early 20th century in Paris, Igor Stravinsky comes to Paris at the invitation of the great ballet impresario Diaghilev, and causes a stir, to put it mildly. Why does it still cause a stir now, some 12 decades later?
Well, does it cause a stir? I think it doesn't cause a stir anymore. I just think, like I always ask our listeners, really put your ears and your mind in 1913, and just the way the world sounded and the way music sounded then and what was being written then, and then you hear this. And you hear, I mean, now it's, as far as, we've had much more brutal music than this, and we've had much less tuneful music than this. So, it has tunes, it has just like, the rhythms that just like get into your gut in a big way. It's rhythmically motivated. And so the big shock in 1913 was how little melody there was, and how much rhythmic drive there was, how much rhythmic was pervasive in this piece. Now our music is much more rhythmic, and so it's maybe less shocking, but the colors and the moods and the orchestration and just the brilliance of, of the brilliance of the orchestra and the sounds that he makes, and also the brilliance of just the rhythmic drive. I mean, it's like it's just like a wild, colorful, fantastic ride, and it is just so evocative. I mean, each scene, as you go from each scene to scene, it's just so incredibly evocative. And so, yeah, it's great. And I haven't done it since I did it in the Quad Cities in 2013, which was the 100th anniversary. I haven't done it since then. And so just reopening the score, it's like, dang, it just reminds you about how, well, like what an amazing inner ear Stravinsky had, and like how could and imagination. I mean, how could this be formulated in someone's head? Music that was just so completely different from anything that had come before.
Well, and maybe that's where the benefit of a dozen or so decades comes in, is that yes, it was very iconoclastic for its time. Maybe we don't hear that much iconoclasm, but still there's an excitement to it. Like you even mentioned, you open up that score and there's something that is primal, maybe, prehistoric, and that's what he was kind of going for, evoking an image from pagan Russia prior to its Christianization. But there's something in that I think speaks to us no matter where we are.
No question. And he's a storyteller too. I mean, you talked about Angel Lamb being a storyteller. I mean, Stravinsky, a great, great storyteller as well. And that's the thing. I mean, you can close your eyes and listen to this music and imagine these scenes. I mean, it's so vivid and so just is so engulfing. It's just a fantastic thing.
Okay, now I am pretty much a plebeian, so there's another way to prep for this concert, and that is, despite the ballet, which caused quite a stir because they were trying to depict this primitive pagan ceremony, another way to enjoy it is to get your hands on an old recording of Fantasia and what Disney did. Right. And I guess that's a little bit iconoclastic, but is that fair to look at it that way?
Sure, of course. I mean, you don't get the whole piece, and you get an interpretation, which is an interpretation, and your personal interpretation is just as valid as Walt Disney's. But Walt Disney's, of course, I mean, he's yet another great creative artist, and so who's going to argue that aren't dinosaurs? I mean, so yeah, I mean that's absolutely anything's fair game.
Now, will we have, I'm sorry to be in the dark on this, will we have dance along with the second half or just for the first half?
No, just the first half.
Yeah, okay. Well, we can still create the dances in our own minds and wonder about that.
Exactly. And that I like, actually. I like it because, I mean, not that dancers are a distraction. I think for the Angel Lamb piece, anyway, I think it's all really worked out. To have it again for the Rite of Spring, I mean, unless you have the Joffrey Ballet doing the original version, which would be great. I think we let the music speak for itself.
Well, but I do think this is very fitting with the Angel Lamb because I think were you not the alchemist that put Zhongmei and Angel Lamb together at some point,
yes,
right?
Yes.
So no other conductor, no other symphony gets those bragging rights. So of course the first one should be here, and of course it should have the dance involved in it. Just another word or two about Stravinsky. Besides his work in ballet, what are the debts that we owe to him now in 2026?
I think, I mean, he was more funny. I mean, he was very kind of clinical in the way he approached music. Like as far like no excesses, nothing like too emotional. It's he kind of although I mean truth be told, I mean it was more of an act than it was for real. I mean he kind of wanted to separate the heart and the mind, and so that was very much kind of a movement of music making, like I mean, a little more clinical, a little more detached. I mean Stravinsky said, it's not a flower, it's D flat, or whatever I don't know what the famous quote is, but he pretended to detach those things. And so that, I mean, there were people who certainly followed that, and lots of composers who absolutely followed that kind of line of thinking. We've kind of come around a little bit more. We're kind of at a combination of those things. Like, we're not over the top romantics, but we're also not, scientists either. And so I think modern, I mean, every interpreter is different, but modern interpretation is kind of finding that balance between, being effusive and super emotional, or being clinical. And so, maybe it's an aesthetic that, I mean, again, I think he like talked about it more than he actually did it.
Yeah.
And he loved to shock. He loved being shocking, And so it was kind of a big shock then, because at that time, there was Mahler and Strauss and the big German romantics, and and that's where we were. And Strauss continued like up into World War II, and of course the World Wars changed everything aesthetically as well, aesthetically for musicians. And so Stravinsky was super adaptable. In World War I, he wrote the famous L'Histoire du Soldat, because, and it's for a tiny force, because that's all, there were no soldiers, there were no people to play in the orchestras, and so it was for a small ensemble. And he wrote jazz, but he had never heard jazz, but he'd seen it written down. And so we have these kind of pseudo jazz. Anyway, he was just so creative and so flexible, and had just such an, amazing mind, an amazing inner ear, that he could adapt and adopt but still make it his own voice.
I think you've created a beautiful frame for us to approach this concert, whether on Saturday evening at the Adler Theater in Davenport, or Sunday afternoon at Centennial Hall at Augustana College. You have Angel Lamb is inviting us to listen to Our Hearts, and Stravinsky perhaps presenting a bit of the conceit that we need to favor the mind. And so in between those, we'll all come to our own place on the spectrum. I think it's wonderful.
And may I say, I mean, the Rite of Spring is, I mean, it's a iconic, like, world-changing work, and it's a huge orchestra. It's it's like using every possible color, every possible thing in the orchestra. It's just like, and so it is over the top from that standpoint. But what he does with that incredible palette is what's so amazing. And the combinations of sounds, and I mean, he uses old Russian folk songs. He uses everything at his disposal to tell this story. And that's why this piece just takes your breath away. And it has to be recognized as a piece that is just like, I mean, you got to know this piece. You got to hear this piece, and you got to experience this piece live, because it's one of those earth-changing pieces, at the risk of being a bit hyperbolic.
No, I absolutely agree. If you haven't heard this piece live, you haven't heard it. So, friends, there's still time. Head over to qcso.org and get your tickets now. But for now, we want to thank Chris Connolly and Wells Fargo Advisors for their generous support of the Concert Conversation series. And as ever, Maestro Mark Russell Smith, thank you for your time, your attention, and for bringing us these brave new worlds.
My pleasure. Thanks.